All right, so I've been given some instructions for class. This is a new thing for me. There is a package here on the front pew with my name on it, and I'm supposed to, and this is from Jimmy Pullum. And Jimmy, I'm trusting you, brother. Oh, it's from the class. So you guys know what's going on here. Okay, I'm supposed to read this. As we near this is your handwriting. As we near the end of our class on the dangers of social media, the class would like to present you a token of our appreciation. Thanks for the great lessons. Sounds nice so far. Oh, a selfie stick. All right. If this wasn't in the box, I would use it right now. This is something I don't have, so thank you. Do y'all know what a selfie stick is? Extension, so more people in my selfies. But you know, we talked about how dangerous that is. More people get killed taking selfies than shark attacks, so I have to be very careful with it. Thank you, class, for that. It's a great way to open class tonight. We are, talking about social media, and we just have, I think, a couple weeks counting tonight because we're going to do a singing night last Wednesday of the quarter. So this lesson and one more, and we'll be done. And we started talking about matters of health last week, and we started with mental health. And as you can see, tonight we're going to talk about physical health. And that may be surprising to you, and I'll get into the physical dangers of too much social media in a moment. But first I want to establish that Christians should be talking about physical health. And we should be concerned about our bodies. And even though we know that life is short and that we will lose these bodies at some point, we should take care of them, and there's a scriptural basis for that, a foundation for that. I think that some Christians, I'm not sure how many or what the percentages are on this, but I think some Christians are under the impression that as long as we take care of the spirit, it doesn't matter what happens to the body. And they might be surprised to find out that has more in common with Greek philosophy that preceded Jesus than it does with Jesus. I'll give you one example. This is Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher. He said, inasmuch as these two elements were commingled in our begetting, on the one hand, the body, which we have in common with the brutes, animals, I think is what he means there, and on the other, reason and intelligence, which we have in common with the gods, some of us incline toward the former relationship, which is unblessed by fortune and is mortal, and only a few toward that which is divine and blessed. So he's saying it's one or the other. It's not both. They're commingled temporarily, would be his position. And you're going to lose that which you have in common with the brutes, with the animals. And only that which is spiritual has qualities that are divine and blessed. And this is a position that I find pretty common among Christians. What's the big deal about my body? And I've heard people say it's just dirt, or my body is just dust. And there is some truth to that. Let's go to Genesis and read about the creation of man. And in Genesis chapter 2, we read that we are composed of dust. Verse 7 says that the Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living creature. So our bodies were composed of dust, and in a sense, we are dust. And then after the sin was committed by Adam and Eve, and they fell under the curse that God brought upon them, in the words to Adam, you hear this in Genesis chapter 3, beginning verse 17. Because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, For you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Now, I have pondered these verses for a long time. And there's some relationship between the man, which, by the way, Adam's name, Adam, means ground or dirt or dust. There's some relationship between Adam, the man of dust, and the ground that he is forced to cultivate with thorns and thistles. And I haven't quite figured all of that out, but I do understand the end of that. When he dies, his body is going to decompose and return to the elements from which it came. So we are dust, but we're not just dust. Our bodies are more than dust. And that brings me over to Romans. Let's go to Romans chapter 8. Reflecting back on Genesis 3, Paul writes in Romans 8, verse 20, that the creation, he's talking about the natural world that we were just reading about that fell under this curse, the thorns and the thistles. The creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. Now this is, he's using some poetic language here, but he's describing the created world in terms of personification. The animal world, the plant world, the earth, it is subject to death and decay. The second law of thermodynamics, entropy has taken over. Everything's winding down, and there's this groaning of creation as it's headed toward destruction. But there's more to this. Not only creation, Paul says, verse 23, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit, meaning we have this indwelling Spirit that is our guarantee or down payment on heaven, who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for the adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. So Paul is saying the world we're in now is fallen. And so people get diseases and people die. And bodies decompose and return to the ground. But the whole world is in the pains of childbirth, because one day those bodies will be redeemed. Now you notice he said the bodies will be redeemed here. He didn't just say your souls will be redeemed. I think a lot of us read, when we see redemption, we automatically think about forgiveness of sin. That's not what it means here. Because of the forgiveness of sin and the resurrection of Christ and the power of God and His love for us and His grace for us, because of that, not only will our souls be redeemed, but our bodies will be redeemed. Now, of course, they're not going to be redeemed into what they once were, but they're going to be something even more marvelous. For a short verse on that, turn to Philippians chapter 3 and look at verse 20. Our citizenship is in heaven, and from it we await a Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ, who will transform our lowly body to be like His glorious body by the power that enables Him to subject all things to Himself. There's a longer treatment of that in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, where the natural body is contrasted with the spiritual body. We are in our natural body now, the body of dust, taken after the man of dust. But one day, in the resurrection, at the end of time, all bodies will be redeemed. All bodies will be raised, rather. The bodies of the wicked and the bodies of the righteous. That's John chapter 5, verses 28 and 29. And the righteous will be raised incorruptible, imperishable, immortal, never to see disease, death, or decay again. In view of that, we should take care of our bodies. Because to dismiss our body as something unimportant or to neglect our bodies and not take care of them is a way of not forecasting that future hope that we've been promised. Taking care of your body and glorifying God in your body is a way of saying one day this body will be raised immortal and I will dwell with God forever in eternity. I think we need to think more about the resurrection and what it has to say about the way we should care for our bodies now. And it's not just the resurrection. It's also the idea that our bodies are temples of God. And this teaching comes from 1 Corinthians 6, 19 and 20, among other places. Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own, for you are bought with a price. So glorify God in your body. The context here is fornication or sexual immorality, which was a big problem in Corinth. They were using their bodies for evil things and justifying it, saying the body is for sex, and the body is for food, and the body is for drink, and the spirit is for God, and these things are separate. These things don't have to affect one another. The body doesn't affect the spirit, and the spirit doesn't affect the body. And that came from that Greek culture that we were discussing a while ago when we shared the quote from Epictetus. These parts for a moment are commingling, but the body that we share in common with brutes, it'll return to the ground, and our spirits, only our spirits are blessed and holy. And they were affected by that mentality. And so Paul is stressing here the body. Now, he could have made this point talking about the spirit. But because the problem with sexual immorality, he was trying to get them to see what you do with your body is very important. It is your body in which the Spirit dwells. And your body has been bought with a price. Your whole person, body, soul, and spirit, has been bought with a price. So you glorify God with your body. He's saying it's impossible to glorify God with your spirit and not the body. The body hasn't come along with the spirit. So is it important what you do with your body? Yes. And Christian principles teach that we need to take care of ourselves physically, mentally, and spiritually. And so this lesson has a place here. We need to be talking about the effect of technology, namely social media, on our bodies. Now, I don't need to tell you we have a physical health crisis in this country, and there's been more talk about that, in the whole Make America Healthy Again slogan. And, maybe some good will come out of that attention, but we're in a bind right now as Americans. We have the lowest life expectancy observed since 2003. I was under the impression until I saw that statistic that we were living longer than ever before, just because of modern medicine and the advancement of technology and what we're learning in science. But the science can be there and the technology can be there, but if we're not taking care of ourselves, it doesn't do us any good. Our nation experiences the highest chronic disease burden among developed countries. Developed countries there's some examples here: United Kingdom, France, Germany. Countries that have the technology and the wealth to take care of themselves, we have the highest amount of chronic illness among those types of countries. The U.S. obesity rate is 2 times that of our peer nations on average. And the number of reported pregnancy-related deaths in the U.S. has steadily increased from 7.2 deaths per 100,000 live births in 1987 to 17.3 deaths per 100,000 live births in 2017, the highest among developed countries. Now, if somebody had told you, without showing you the evidence, they were having fewer infant fatalities in 1987 than now, you wouldn't have believed them, because of our advance in science. But again, we have to take care of ourselves in order for it to help. So we have a physical health crisis, and my point isn't that all of that is caused by social media, but some of it is. Remember, our young people are spending 9 hours a day on the internet, and at least 2 of that on social media. They're 9 hours a day, they're in front of screens, which means that's taking up time for exercise and outside activities and doing things with friends and taking care of themselves in athletics and sports and all the things that we do to stay healthy. And a lot of them are eating junk while they're in front of the screens. And so there's definitely a connection to the downtrend in health and the uptrend in the screen time that we're having. Now, I'll get into some specifics. I have 4 specific health problems that are contributed to by social media. And first is physical fitness, or lack thereof. Here's another stat for you from the CDC. Childhood obesity has tripled in the United States since the 1970s. According to the CDC, nearly 1 in 5 children ages 6 to 19 is overweight. So 20% of our children are overweight. So what we need to do is cultivate good, healthy habits. And I'm going to talk about habits a lot tonight, but I'll start here. It's really hard to do that. We start out by just stopping the bad habit, right? But a lot of times what we do is we quit the bad habit and we don't replace it with a good one. It reminds me of a parable the Lord taught in Matthew chapter 12. It's about demons, but I think it has an application to what we're talking about here in terms of habits. Matthew 12:43, when the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it passes through waterless places seeking rest, but finds none. Then it says, I will return to my house from which I came, and when it comes, it finds the house empty, swept, and put in order. Then it goes and brings with it 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and dwell there, and the last state of that person is worse than the first. So also will it be with this evil generation. What does that mean? I don't know if I've ever gotten to the bottom of that, but I know an application of it is, if you take out a bad thing and you don't replace it with a good thing, you just have a vacuum there, that vacuum is going to be filled with even more evil things. So you remove the bad habit, stuff you're eating, or a sedentary way of life, or screen time, but you don't replace it with healthy alternatives, well, you're just going to go back to the way you were, and you're going to be even worse the second time than you were the first. You know, whenever we take our kids' phones away from them for a period of time, there's always this thing, and I think Jackson knows not to say it, but I know he's thinking it, well, what else is there to do? You know, that's the question. And that's precisely what we've got to figure out. What did kids do before they had phones? How did they occupy their time? A lot of you grew up like I did. Your mom just said, go outside. And she didn't tell you what to do out there. So you go outside and you just look around. First thing you want to see is maybe another friend's mom did the same thing to them. Maybe I can find him. No, he's not here. Well, I'll get on my bicycle and ride around and see what's going on. Or I'll take this stick and I'll pretend it's a gun or something. You know, you just make up things. Use your imagination. You play games. You learn about your friends in the neighborhood. And I know there are reasons why some of that has gone away, and that's sad that we live in a society where parents don't feel like they can let their kids roam free as much as they did. And kids may be safer in some ways, but the harm that has come to them is very clear. They don't know how to occupy their time without technology, and we've got to teach them. You know, just saying figure it out, it's not going to work. You have to teach them and give them the space for that. Make opportunities for that. And if you don't, they're just going to fall back into the old habits that we let them start. Okay, let's talk about addiction. I was talking about habits a moment ago, and I said I'd come back to it. And so addiction is a problem. Now, the social media platforms are created to be addictive because the longer they can keep your eyeballs on a screen, the more ads they can sell. And it's a money-making enterprise. If you're not paying for it, you are the product. I heard somebody say that today, and I thought that was a great statement. If you're not paying for it, you're the product. When you go on social media, you're the product. You're what's being sold. And the advertisers want your eyeballs glued to that screen, so it's profitable for these companies to make this technology addictive, and it is highly addictive. The good news is your brain can physically change. Some people would say this belonged in last week's lesson on mental health, and maybe some of it does. But I put it in physical health because I wanted to talk about this concept of neuroplasticity or brain plasticity. the idea that your brain actually physically changes according to your behavior. When you form a habit, physiological changes are occurring in the brain. I found some charts. I hope you can't read that, can you? I can't read it from here. But this is a description of neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to reorganize itself both in structure and how it functions. So neurogenesis is continuous generation of new neurons in certain brain regions. Not all neurons are regenerated, but some are. New synapses are formed when new skills and experiences create new neural connections. Think of a neural connection as a pathway. Whenever you do something new, you have like a little path, a new little path made in your brain, a connection between neurons. And it's very faint because you've only done it one time, but if you do it again, that connection gets stronger. You do it again, it gets stronger. It gets stronger and stronger each time you do it, so that new habits are formed. And the good news is strengthened synapses occur, but also weakened synapses. So strengthened synapses, repetition and practice strengthens neural connections. You call it muscle memory. That's what we're talking about here. I heard somebody say 90% of life is on autopilot. Well, you know what that means. Have you heard people talk about road hypnosis? Some guy's driving the same route, 4-hour route all the time, and he said, I didn't even realize where I was until I got home, and I was like, I hadn't even been thinking about the road and where I was, because your body is kind of taking over. Your brain is still involved. It's just that automatic part of you is taking over. Weakened synapses, hear this, connections in the brain that aren't used become weak. So this is encouraging if you're struggling with a bad habit. The more you do new habits, and the less you do bad habits, the more your brain changes. You can overcome them, but it's very, very hard. Neuroplasticity can result from positive things and negative things. Look at this. Traumatic events. Things that get all your senses involved or that are really shocking to the system will form stronger synapses. Stress, those are some negative things. But social interaction and meditation, emotions, good or bad, learning, paying attention, and yes, you can force yourself to pay attention, diet, exercise, and new experiences. All these things have an effect on the physical brain. I know you can't read that. Bright and dark sides of neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity makes your brain resilient. It enables you to recover from stroke, injury, and birth abnormalities. You can learn new ways of being and responding to conflict. In many cases, you can also overcome depression, addiction, obsessive-compulsive patterns, ADHD, and other issues. Now, the dark side of it is it means the brain is always learning, but the brain is neutral. It doesn't know the difference between good and bad. It learns whatever is repeated, both the helpful and the unhelpful thoughts, actions, and habits. And so neuroplasticity may entrench depressive, anxious, obsessive, and overreactive patterns. So look at the patterns of your life and think about the effect that's having on your brain. And in the context of this class, think about the patterns of your technology usage. And the easiest way to do that is just look at your phone. Mine gives a notification on Sundays. I don't know if that's true of everybody, but on Sunday I get a notification of my screen time. That's the easiest way to see your patterns. If your screen time is high, try to get it lower. And how do you get it lower? Do some of the things we're talking about. Create new habits. You probably go to your phone at certain times. Another great example is a commercial break. Do you grab your phone during a commercial break? I do. I hate commercials. For a little window of time, we had life without commercials. Do you remember that? I cut the cord because of commercials and went to streaming. And now, if you want no ads, you have to pay like $600 a month for an app. And so we're back on commercials again. What do? I reach for the phone and scroll through and do nothing. And that's just a habit. It's not anything that enriches my life. And so I need to, maybe if I'm watching TV, of course I'm talking about one screen and another screen. It's not a great example. But, one screen at a time might be a new habit I'd try to form. If I got the TV on, I'm going to put my phone way over here, and I'm not going to reach for it during the commercial break. And see if I can retrain my brain, form new synapses that, maybe talk to Julie during commercial breaks, or unload the dishwasher, or something healthy like that. So I think it's an encouraging idea. Now, here are some questions to ask if you're not convinced already that you're a social media addict. 3 questions. Am I preoccupied with social media, the internet, video games, or technology? Well, I need to get this in that other room down there, don't I? Number 2, am I unable to control my technology usage? And this is the one that I think really gets you. Do I feel distressed when I'm unable to use my devices? Parents, what do your kids look like when you first take their phone away from them? Or do you even know? Have you ever been bold enough to do that? What do they look like you've just killed their puppy. I mean, the attitude that a child has when you take their device away from them will show you the addiction. It shouldn't be the end of the world to lose your phone for a few hours or a few days. It shouldn't be the end of the world. You should be able to find other things to do. And if your life is such that you can't survive without that little screen in your pocket, then there's a problem. You're addicted. And you need to be careful what you're addicted to. Here's what Peter said. They promise them freedom, but they themselves are slaves of corruption. For whatever overcomes a person, to that he is enslaved. Peter is talking about some false teachers that had crept into the church, the churches that he's writing to. And these false teachers promoted themselves as great religious leaders, examples to the people. But they were characterized by all kinds of sin and sensuality. Peter gives a very graphic description of them there in chapter 2. And he said, here's the proof. They're promising you freedom. They would preach the license of grace. You know, you're saved by grace and not by works. Therefore, the Lord doesn't care how you behave. You can do whatever you want to do, and you're forgiven of it. You just live whatever life you want to live. That's the freedom they were preaching, but they're slaves of corruption. And Peter's saying, if you don't believe me, here's the rule. Whatever you're overcome by, to that you are enslaved. And these teachers were clearly overcome by sexual immorality and greed and avarice. And that was clear to everybody involved. And Peter said, just look at their lives. What do they spend most of their time on? What consumes them? What is their life really about? All this freedom is immorality, and that is their slave master. So who is your taskmaster? Who rules over you? Who is your king? And when you look at him, when you look at it, is that who you really want to serve? So how do we overcome bad habits? Well, number one, determine what practices should take the place of your excessive online habits. And I think it'd be good to write this down, just do some thinking about it. Because it really is, when you get into a habit of occupying your time with something, you forget what other things there are to do out there. You might have to get a little creative and use your imagination. Is there a hobby you want to take up? Do you want to exercise more? Do you want to go for walks? There are all kinds of things you could learn, you could read. But think about what I want to do instead of spending all my time online. Number two, engage as much of the brain as possible when you try to change your neural wiring. When we were looking at those charts a minute ago, neural pathways are stronger when more senses are activated. So if you're trying to start a new habit, involve as much of the senses as you can. So let's say reading is a good example. People want to read but don't. I found that to be the case. A common New Year's resolution is I want to read more books. And then, we buy the books, but they just sit on the nightstand, right? So how do you start that habit? Well, you get more than one sense involved. Usually reading involves just the sight, the eyes. But make it tactile. Get a pencil or a pen or a marker that you really like, and mark that book up. And then you're getting your sense of touch involved. Maybe there's some kind of music you can play that won't be too distracting, that you can get your sense of hearing involved. Or maybe you can do audiobooks. Get that way. That's just one example. If you're exercising, bring as many of the senses in and pay attention to what you're doing. Don't just mindlessly go into it, and go into it with a good attitude. All of those things are packed into that second step there. Thirdly, repeat. You know, what is it I've heard that if you do the same thing 21 days, it becomes a habit? The research actually says it's more like 66 days, but it's true. You do something enough times, it becomes a habit. So try something for a month. I've also heard 6 weeks. That seems to match the literature. Give it 6 weeks and really force yourself through what you know is healthy and good for you. And it will change your brain. It will physically change your brain. And you can create new habits. You can do it. It's extremely hard, but now you know the reason why it's hard, because you have these ruts in your head that you have to cause to fade, and you have to create new roads to travel. Okay, sleep deprivation. Here's how much sleep we should be getting. School-age children need 9 to 12 hours of sleep per day. Teens, and I know they're not getting this, 8 to 10 hours. Is your teenager getting 10 hours of sleep? Not on Saturday morning. I'm talking about like on a school night. Probably not. Adults need 7 or more hours a day. The average teenager is sleeping fewer than 6.5 hours per night. And that means over the course of the school year, students are deprived of so many hours of sleep that it adds up to 50 missing nights of sleep per school year. So it's a big problem. And look, I joke with Julie, I don't know why the Lord requires us to sleep so much. It seems like such a waste of time. I mean, you lie down, you close your eyes, and you just lay there for 8 hours. It's annoying that you have to stop your day, you stop what you're doing, and go. And another thing about sleeping is, it's the only activity that you pretend to do before you actually do it. Isn't that weird? Okay, I'm going to lie down, I'm going to close my eyes and pretend I'm sleeping and hope that I actually will fall asleep. You don't do that with anything else. I mean, if I'm going to go for a swim, I'm not going to pretend to swim and then swim. So I don't know what the deal is, but the Lord knows best, and our bodies repair, and I think I've got some slides on that in a moment. But we're not getting enough sleep, and this technology is interfering with it big time. Technology displaces sleep time. This is the first way that it interferes. When your child brings his or her phone up to their bedroom so they can have an alarm clock, they probably have their notifications on, and when that text message goes off, do you think they're going to resist the temptation to go look and see who's texting them? Or when that notification goes off on their favorite social media app, do you think they're going to resist the temptation? I know what they do. We make our kids plug their phones in downstairs, and they go upstairs to their bedroom. And then after they're upstairs, we used to stay up later than them. It's getting hard to do nowadays. But their phones are downstairs with us. They're just going off. And their friends are texting and chatting and trying to get their attention. And it's all night long. Some kids are up, they just doze. They get up in the middle of the night and check their phone. So technology displaces sleep time. It causes increased emotional, cognitive, or physical stimulation, which disrupts sleep. Think about what we said last week. 1 hour of screen time reduces your contentment with life by 14%. You get depressed every time you look at your screen. I mean, this is what the science says. Take it up with the researchers. I didn't make this up. And so if you're looking at your phone too much, it's going to increase your emotional stimulation. Maybe it's positive energy, but it's not calming you down. There are apps that claim to do that kind of thing, and maybe they do, but the apps that we spend most of our time on are not those kinds of apps. And then the white light illumination of phones, tablets, and other devices disrupts the circadian rhythms or our sleep cycles. In other words, you're fooling your brain into thinking it's day when it's night. That's a simplified way of saying it. These are the three main ways technology is interfering with our sleep. Why is this important? I mentioned a while ago, the Lord made us where we're required to take 8 hours a day to give over to sleep. Sleep deprivation leads to obesity, loss of focus, memory loss, and anxiety. Without sleep, you miss out on restorative processes that help the synapses of the brain and cognition. Also, growth hormones are secreted at a higher rate during sleep. Those are some pretty important things, and I'm sure there are many others that we could mention tonight. And so, sleep, that's another physical detriment that our technology is bringing us. We have control over these things. Now, I really want to encourage you that if you still have children at home using these devices, to get them an old-fashioned alarm clock and make them plug their phones in the living room or some public area overnight. Don't let them take it to bed with them. It's a bad idea. Let's talk about safety, physical safety, and then we'll be done. I only have a few minutes for this. 82% of crimes committed by online predators originate from social networking sites. If somebody is a child predator or pedophile, they're using social media to hunt children. And this is just a fact. As internet safety awareness has increased, predatory behavior has declined. So the more we talk about this with our kids, the safer they are. Still, 9% of kids who use the internet have received an unwanted sexual solicitation. 1% would be too much. 9%? That's really bad. Andrew Coker, I saw Kayla a while ago. I don't think Andrew's here tonight, but he shared this with me. I got online and searched around. I saw that a lot of police departments are putting these out. This is 15 apps parents should know. And I'm going to go over a few of them, not all 15, just to give you an idea. And I encourage you to look and see what apps your kids are using. And some of y'all may have to help me out on this. But don't just look at the apps on the screen. But, Jason, what do? You go to the App Store and click their profile picture and then go under that and dig in there and see what they've downloaded, because they might be really good at deleting apps and putting them back on again. That kind of thing happens. So here's one. This is the calculator app. It's not the one that comes with your phone, but it's designed to hide photos, videos, files, and browser history. In other words, it's a dummy calculator. You click it, and it's messaging and photos and videos, and this is just to hide things from your parents. So don't be fooled by that one. There's the real calculator app, and then there's this one that has that percentage mark. Discord, that's an app that allows users to talk to friends or strangers in real time via voice, text, or video while playing video games. It's used a lot for messaging in video games. And the reason this is on here is because a lot of parents will look at that and they'll think that has to do with video games. I know what video games my kids play. It's fine. But they don't realize there's messaging going on and all kinds of other things. And with most of these apps, they're not inherently bad. You just need to know how they're being used. And then you need to snoop and get involved and see how your kid is using them. They may be using them appropriately, but maybe not. Kik is another messaging app that kids are using to bypass traditional text messaging features. And it may be one of those that they're loading and then deleting after they use them. Watch out for that one. Omegle is a chat app that connects users with strangers. That already sounds like a bad idea, right? Criminals have been known to use the app to exploit children, often recording the video chat and using it for blackmail. So a lot of bullying occurs on these apps, as well as predatory behavior. So what they'll do is they'll get a young person or another person to do something indiscreet. They'll record it, and then they've got them. give me $1,000 or this goes public, that kind of thing. Reddit is, if you've ever done an internet search, you've run into Reddit. And then if you're doing it on your phone, it's going to try to get you to download the app instead of reading it. Most of it's garbage anyway. But Reddit is a chat discussion forum app, and there's no holds barred. Anything can be posted on it. I don't think they have many rules about the content. And so you have to be careful about that, as you would anywhere on the internet. Snapchat. This is the one that I'm most conflicted about, okay? First of all, look at the mascot, a ghost. Is that a good mascot to have? Should we have a ghost? I guess some of you Blue Devils are okay with that, but I guess you Devils are okay. Ghost, that'll tell you right off the bat that we got a problem. It's one of the most popular apps among kids. And the problem is, Snapchat was created, and this is the words of the founders of Snapchat, to make sexting safe. That's why they created this app that has your posts disappear in 15 seconds. Now, why is that ever needed? Like, if you're going to message somebody, I like to have a record. I know I sound like an old fuddy-duddy now, but I like to have a record of my correspondence with people so I remember what I said to them. Because my memory's not so good and I need that archived. Snapchat's selling point is that they disappear your posts, but not really. I mean, first of all, this idea of anonymity is an illusion. Nothing you put out there online ever really disappears. And, I'm told that on Snapchat, if somebody captures the screen before your post deletes itself, you're alerted to that. And I don't know if you can stop it at that point, but you know that they got your indiscreet picture you didn't want taken. Also, Snapchat is not real secure. There's some security issues about who's getting your information, and that's something to look out for. But the main reason kids like Snapchat is because their parents aren't on it. And that's a problem. You know, when your kids are young and using this, they need to understand you're going to be on it too. You're going to be, if they want a Facebook account, you're going to be on Facebook and you're going to be nosing around. I was going to talk about TikTok, but that's in the news a lot. The main thing is get nosy with your kids' phones. Also be aware of what you're doing, and realize there are bad people out there using these things to try to contact your kids and even scam you. We didn't talk about this, but there are a lot of scams that are being run on Facebook. I know one case where an older woman thought she was contributing to mission work, and she gave $15,000 to a scammer, and that happened on Facebook. And so those issues are not just on children, but on everybody. All right. So we'll have one more lesson next week, and then we'll be done. Thank you for the selfie stick. When I figure out how to use it, I will safely use it to take a selfie of somebody.